15,000 people were inside center court. And for a few seconds, Wimbledon did something Wimbledon almost never does. It froze. Not because the crowd did not understand what had happened, because they understood it too well. Across the net stood Iga Swiatek, the defending Wimbledon champion, the number 3 seed, a 6-time Grand Slam champion, a player who had spent years making the sport feel predictable when she was on the right side of history. And now she was standing there beaten, not by another superstar, not by a former champion, not by someone who had been waiting in the top 10 for years. She had just lost to Eala, a 21-year-old from the Philippines who, not long ago, was still trying to convince the tennis world that she belonged in rooms like this. The final score was 7-6, 6-2, but that score does not come close to explaining what it felt like. Because this was not just an upset. This was not just one of those random Wimbledon afternoons where the grass gets slippery, the favorite gets nervous, and the draw suddenly opens. This felt bigger. It felt like the exact moment a player stopped being a nice story and became a real problem. And the strangest part is this. 1 year ago, most casual tennis fans in the United States could have heard the name Eala and had absolutely no reaction, no memory, no highlight, no emotional attachment, just a blank stare and one simple question. Wait, who? That is what makes this moment so powerful. Because to understand why center court went silent, you cannot start with the final point. You have to start with the version of Eala. Nobody was watching. Before the tears, before the flags, before the headlines, before the defending champion had to walk off center court knowing she had been outplayed by someone the world had underestimated. A year ago, Eala was not a name sitting at the center of the tennis conversation. She was not the player everyone circled in the draw. She was not the dangerous seed nobody wanted to face. She was a young left-hander trying to climb out of the middle of the tour the hard way through the kind of matches fans do not see, on courts that do not trend, in tournaments where the only people really paying attention are family, coaches, diehard fans, and an entire country refreshing scores from the other side of the world. And on paper, there was no obvious reason to believe she was about to do something historic at Wimbledon. Before this tournament, Eala had only one main draw win at a Grand Slam. One win, 5 losses. That is not the resume of someone people expect to dethrone the defending champion on center court. But tennis careers are not built only on paper. Sometimes the important parts happen in the quiet. The extra tournaments, the ugly wins. The losses that do not look meaningful until months later, the weeks where nothing changes publicly, but something inside the player is being hardened. For Eala, that was the grind. WTA 125 events, long travel weeks, grass court matches where every bounce felt different. A title in Birmingham that meant everything to the people watching closely, but barely moved the larger sports world. A final in Eastbourne that looked, for a few moments, like it might become the breakthrough. And then came the loss that could have broken the whole story. Eastbourne. That is where this Wimbledon moment really begins. Not on center court, not in front of royalty, celebrities, and television cameras. But in a final that slipped through her hands in the most painful way possible, Eala was facing Maya Joint. She lost the first set 6-4. Then she responded like a player who refused to let the match run away from her, storming through the second set 6-1. By the third set, the match had turned into the kind of fight young players remember for years. Eala had chances. Real chances. Championship chances. 4 of them. 4 times, she stood close enough to reach out and touch the title. And 4 times, it disappeared. The deciding tiebreak went all the way to 12-10. Maya Joint survived. Eala walked away with the kind of loss that does not leave your body right away. And later, when she talked about it, she did not try to pretend it was fine. She said it hurt. She said she cried. She said she could not even watch the highlights for months. That detail matters. Because athletes are trained to sound strong. They are trained to say the right things after losses. They talk about learning experiences, moving forward, taking positives, but sometimes a loss is not a lesson yet. Sometimes it is just a wound. And Eastbourne was a wound. Imagine being 21 years old, carrying the flag of a country that has almost no Grand Slam history, knowing people back home are staying awake for every point, and then coming that close to the title. Not close in a vague way. 4 championship points close. Then losing anyway. That kind of match asks a brutal question. Are you really built for this? Not for practice. Not for potential. Not for the nice headlines about being talented. For this, for the moment when the match is yours, and then it is not. For the silence after a trophy ceremony where you are not the one holding the trophy. For the flight home or the next hotel room when nobody can fix it for you. That is where players either start protecting themselves from pressure or they learn how to walk back into it. Eala walked back in, and that is what made Wimbledon different. Because when she arrived at center court to face Swiatek, she was not walking into pressure for the first time. She knew what it felt like to have chances. She knew what it felt like to lose them. She knew how badly a big moment could hurt if it went wrong. And maybe that is why, when the match got tight, she did not play like someone hoping the champion would miss. She played like someone who had already survived the nightmare version. The first set against Swiatek was not just close. It was a test of nerve. Swiatek struck first. She broke early. For a moment, the match looked like it might settle into the familiar pattern. Champion absorbs the early energy, favorite takes control, underdog slowly realizes the stage is too big. But Eala did not go away. She broke back. Then she broke again. She used height. She used angles. She used that lefty forehand to pull Swiatek into uncomfortable spaces. And, most importantly, she refused to let the match become only about Swiatek. That is the hidden danger of playing a champion. You can start reacting to their reputation instead of playing the ball in front of you. Eala never looked trapped by the name across the net. At 5-3, she had a chance to close the set. Swiatek fought back. Of course she did. Champions do not hand you history politely. Swiatek ripped forehands, pushed the set back level, and forced Eala into the place where nerves usually expose young players. The tiebreak, on center court, against the defending Wimbledon champion. And this is where the match became something more than tennis. Eala went up 5-2. Then Swiatek came roaring back. Suddenly, the lead was gone. Suddenly, the crowd could feel the champion rising. Suddenly, every old tennis instinct told you the same thing. This is where the favorite escapes. This is where the young player thinks too much. This is where the upset dies quietly. Swiatek reached set point. Eala saved it. Swiatek reached another. Eala saved that too. Not with panic, not with desperate tennis, with a kind of stubborn calm that felt almost shocking for someone in that position. Point by point, she refused to leave. And when Eala finally got her chance, she did not blink. The tiebreak ended 11-9. The first set was hers, 7-6. After 84 minutes, against Iga Swiatek on center court. That alone would have been enough to shake the tournament. But the next part is what changed the way people saw Alex Eala. Because surviving a set like that is one thing. Backing it up is something else entirely. A lot of young players win a dramatic first set against a champion and then spend the next 30 minutes emotionally recovering from what they just did. They drop their intensity. They protect the lead. They look up at the scoreboard and realize they are halfway to the biggest win of their life. That is when the champion comes back. But Eala did not drift. She accelerated. At the start of the second set, she played like the first set had not drained her. It had freed her. She broke early. Then she kept pressing. She defended with balance. She attacked with purpose. She forced Swiatek to hit extra shots from uncomfortable positions. She passed her at the net. She protected her serve better than people expected. And every time Swiatek tried to pull the match back toward familiar ground, Eala changed the shape of the rally again. The The second set did not feel like a fluke. It felt controlled. That is the part that should scare the rest of the tour. Because beating a champion in a wild tiebreak can happen. Outplaying one after that tiebreak is different. Eala went up 4-0. Swiatek clawed one break back because champions always make you close the door twice. Then came the final game. And even there, it was not simple. It never is at Wimbledon. Swiatek pushed. She saved match points. She forced the game deeper and deeper, stretching the tension until every person in the stadium understood that history was not going to arrive easily. Eala had to earn the ending, and on her third match point, she finally did. A four-hand winner. Match 7-6, 6-2. The defending champion was out, and Eala dropped to the grass. Not a planned celebration, not a polished reaction for the cameras. She just went down, hands on the grass, head low, tears coming before the moment had even fully settled. That is when center court changed. The crowd rose. The sound came back slowly, then all at once. But for those first seconds, there was something almost unreal about it. A young player from the Philippines, a country that had never had a tennis moment quite like this, was on her knees at the most famous court in the sport. And everyone watching knew they had just seen something that would not stay inside the tennis world. This was going home with people. To Manila, to Filipino families in London, to kids who had never seen someone from their country stand in that exact position, to people who do not normally watch tennis but suddenly had a reason to care. That is why this win mattered beyond the draw. By reaching the second week of Wimbledon, Eala became the first player from the Philippines to go this deep at a Grand Slam. Not just the first woman, the first player from her country. That is the kind of sentence that sounds simple until you sit with it. For generations, tennis has been dominated by countries with academies, systems, funding, history, and infrastructure. The Philippines has passion. It has athletes. It has fans. But it did not have a Grand Slam second-week breakthrough. Now it does. And the person who delivered it was not some finished superstar dropped into the sport fully formed. It was a player who had been outside the spotlight, absorbing losses, building her ranking, and learning how to turn pain into nerve. That is why Eastbourne matters so much. Without Eastbourne, maybe this still looks like a miracle. With Eastbourne, it looks more like growth. There is a difference. A miracle makes a player seem lucky. Growth makes a player seem dangerous. Eala did not just get hot for 2 sets. She showed the exact quality that separates real breakthroughs from one-day upsets. She showed she could lose a heartbreaking final, carry that scar, and then handle a bigger pressure point a year later without falling apart. She showed that the Miami win over Swiatek was not some strange one-off. 16 months earlier, she had beaten Swiatek in Miami. Now she had beaten her again at Wimbledon. One win can be called a shock. 2 wins become evidence. And when those 2 wins come against a 6-time Grand Slam champion, people stop laughing at the idea that you belong. They start adjusting the scouting report. That is where Eala is now. Not just inspiring, not just historic, dangerous. There is another part of this that people do not talk about enough. Money changes careers. Not in the flashy way people on the internet talk about it, but in the practical way tennis players understand immediately. By reaching the 4th round, Eala guaranteed herself £300,000 in prize money. For the biggest stars, that number might be 1 line in a season. For a rising player from a country without a deep tennis machine behind her, that kind of money can change a calendar. It can pay for better travel, better recovery, more coaching support, a stronger team, more freedom to choose the right tournaments instead of always chasing survival. And it also changes the imagination of everyone coming after her, because once one player from your country does it, the dream becomes less abstract. The next kid does not have to imagine a Filipino player on center court. She has already seen one. That is how history works in sports. First, it looks impossible. Then one person breaks through. Then, suddenly, The next generation grows up believing the door was always there. Eala is not just walking through that door, she is leaving it open. But here is the part that makes this story even more interesting. This run is not finished. Waiting next is Jasmine Paolini. And that is a completely different kind of problem. Paolini is not Swiatek. She does not bring the same aura of dominance or the same heavyweight champion feeling from the baseline. But she brings something just as dangerous in a Grand Slam second week. Speed, energy, experience. A game that makes opponents play 1 to 2 crate, to quaity army, to cold, to core more ball. Then another, until the point becomes messy and the pressure turns physical. She is a former Wimbledon finalist. She knows this stage. She knows how to survive deep in majors. So the question changes now. Before Swiatek, the question was whether Eala could shock the world. Now the question is harder. Can she handle what comes after shocking the world? Because the second match after the breakthrough is often the real test. The cameras are bigger. The expectations change overnight. The player who is free to swing suddenly has something to protect. Everyone wants the interview. Everyone wants the quote. Everyone wants the next miracle. And that is when a young player has to decide what kind of story this really is. A beautiful upset? Or the beginning of a new level? That is why the silence on center court matters. It was not just the silence of people watching a champion lose. It was the silence of people realizing they had underestimated the wrong player. Eala did not arrive at this moment by accident. She built it through small tournaments, painful losses, long weeks, and pressure that most players from traditional tennis powers will never fully understand. She carried a country that had never seen this before. She carried the memory of Eastbourne. She carried the record that said she had only one Grand Slam main draw win before this tournament. Then she walked onto center court, faced the defending champion, saved 2 set points, took the tiebreak, and ran away with the second set like she had been waiting for that stage her entire life. And maybe she had. That is the thing about breakthroughs. To the world, they look sudden. To the player, they are never sudden. They are built in private, they are paid for in losses, they are sharpened in matches nobody remembers. Then one day, the whole world looks up and says, "Where did she come from?" But Eala knows exactly where she came from. She came from the courts after school, from training days with family, from the Rafa Nadal Academy, from the tournaments that barely made headlines, from the final she could not watch back, from a country that kept believing before the rest of the tennis world had any reason to. And now, she is in the second week of Wimbledon. The defending champion is gone. The Philippines has its first Grand Slam second week player. And center court has a new memory. Not of a scream. Not of chaos. Not even of celebration. A few seconds of silence. The kind of silence that happens when history moves faster than people are ready for. Maybe this is the peak of one incredible run. Maybe Jasmine Paolini stops it in the next round. Maybe the draw gets harder, the pressure gets heavier, and Wimbledon reminds everyone how brutal Grand Slam tennis can be. But maybe not. Maybe this is the moment Eala stops being treated like a surprise and starts being treated like a threat. Maybe that silence was not the end of the story. Maybe it was the sound of everyone realizing the story had just begun.